Well, welcome again to the Suppress Herald podcast. Here we are on the 17th of January, and ice, ice, ice. Pretty much all we're talking about these days is ice. And there's a lot of lies, a lot of propaganda, and as we've talked about, the Suppress Herald, which is owned by the National Distrust for Local News, which is going broke and slowly losing money and selling off properties, is because they're liars and nobody believes that it's actual media, and they continue down their road. And it's, as I've said, politics is local and so is propaganda. And the propagandists at the Suppress Herald just keep on keeping on. And, we can see in the news over the last few days, as I talked about in a previous podcast just last week, they're down to five or six items that are just going to be repeated ad infinitum to try and convince voters that reality isn't real. And immigration has been replaced in this country by mass migration. Damage was severely done by the open borders policies, letting criminals in, letting, every form of deceit and fraud and everything else to happen. We're overrun with criminals, with fraudsters, with all sorts of the worst of the worst, and they definitely are not assimilating and becoming part of our country. And we'll get to that in a minute. But meanwhile, I've mentioned that they've got a few causes that they'll just never give up on. And we're in an election year now. It's the midterms, and they are desperate, and it's showing they're very desperate to defeat Trump and win the House. And if they can in Congress, the impeachments will start immediately. It is a joke. It is chaos. It is what liberals do. And with the help of their propaganda machine, they have convinced an awful lot of people that up is down, right is left, and men can be women, and vice versa. And that is what kind of place that people are living in, which is a bizarro world that's not real. And, you tell them enough and they'll believe it. I've talked previously about the global warming hoaxes crashing and burning. Bill Gates, I think the biggest thing is Bill Gates basically coming out and publicly saying that there's no existential threat from global warming and that he's going to focus his giving billions and billions of dollars, and the Gates Foundation will be focused more on poverty and development and so forth, rather than on the hoax of global warming. And I've told you, I believe the reason is that Bill Gates employed AI. He's got at his fingertips massive resources, computing resources to run AI. And they did. And global warming came back as a hoax. And it's pretty much a consensus in his little circle that that is going to get known. People are going to figure it out. But the propagandists are not going to let it go. And so you have in the last 3 days things like this. Scientists call another near record hot year a warning shot of a shifting dangerous climate. We've talked about this also ad infinitum. It isn't a shifting dangerous climate. It's just more of the same. We were told at this time last year, as we moved toward, well, it was later in the spring last year, as we went toward spring and the June start of the hurricane season, it was going to be a really, really bad one. And there were a couple of bad hurricanes in the Caribbean. One particularly hit in, down in the Caribbean and did a lot of damage. But not a single hurricane hit mainland USA. They were way, way off. They can't even predict hurricanes in 1 year. How can they tell us what's going to happen 100 years from now? I've said this over and over again. Their modeling is extremely flawed, it's biased, and it's influenced by funding. So here you have this whole, you know, Earth's average temperature last year hovered among one of the three hottest on record. Well, they don't have records accurate for back more than 100 years ago. Thermometers didn't work the same. How did they know what the temperature was 500 years ago? There was no such thing as a thermometer. They didn't exist. They say they can look back and look at trees and look at ice. No, you don't know what the temperature was to 1 degree. This is a hoax. So, six science teams calculated that 2025 was behind 2024 and 2023, while two other groups, NASA and a joint American and British team, said 2025 was slightly warmer. They can't even get 2 years together and figure it out. This is just scare tactics, scaremongering, same old, same old. So that was a few days ago. Then you get a novel sanctuary in Antarctica is preserving ice samples from rapidly melting glaciers. We've talked about this too. Antarctica, why are they doing it in Antarctica? If it's going to melt and it's all going to be gone, how are you going to preserve anything there? The reality is the Antarctic ice shelf is increasing dramatically by millions of tons of ice. Now, ice calves off at the perimeter of the ice cap on Antarctica. That's natural. You've got the waves and sea lapping seawater. If it's still liquid, it's above freezing, and it's lapping at the edges, and it's invariably going to eat away at it, and you're going to have sections calve off. But what's being added is much more than what's falling off. But nobody wants to tell you that. So this is about how they're cutting cores out of glaciers and they're going to preserve them so they can study them later. But the real story here is rapidly melting glaciers, global warming, trying to prop the story up. Where does all this come from to end up in a local suppressed Herald newspaper? We'll get into that at a later date. Here's another one in the weather section on Friday, January 16th. In a warming world, freshwater production is moving deep beneath the sea. Way to do osmosis with the pressure from the oceans and create fresh water. That's the story. But in a warming world, they just have to try and jam it in and jam it in and jam it in and convince you that it's real. The story is crumbling, just like the immigration story is crumbling. It's not immigration, it's mass migration. It's not healthy and it's not helpful and it's overwhelming our systems. Not good. None of these narratives are healthy or good. So now we'll get into just one paper. This is today, Saturday, the 17th of January, with everything going on in Minnesota and other places. And here, Press Herald, excuse me, Suppress Herald, front page, top, Maine organizers prepare for potential ice surge. Volunteers with immigrant advocacy and civil rights groups report an uptick in calls from residents who are concerned for their safety as specifics remain scarce and rumors spread. And so now what you've got is the Suppress Herald propaganda machine spreading fear. Let me tell you something very, very simple. If the police in Portland, especially South Portland, Augusta, and other towns in Maine that refuse to work with ICE, support ICE, honor detainers for illegal immigrants charged with crimes in Maine, if those police departments were cooperating with ICE, you wouldn't even notice ICE being here. When they had an illegal immigrant committed a crime and was going to be deported, if it was just handed over to ICE, that would be a clean safe, innocuous, unknown process. They don't want that. They want everything in the streets. And so they have created chaos. They have forced ICE and our border patrol to go and ferret out illegal criminal aliens, murderers, rapists, and others. Now we're finding out about all the fraudsters stealing from government, from programs, stealing from basically poor people through social programs and massive fraud, taking away resources that should be given to one, Americans, and two, people that truly need it. Instead of buying illegal immigrants, fancy cars, hotels, and funding being funneled to terrorists in Somalia and beyond. So here's the headline: Maine organizers prepare for potential ICE surge. And inside all the stories about it, Insurrection Act, President Donald Trump threatens to invoke 1807 law to quell protests in Minneapolis after shootings. And in the Q&A section, what are your rights when interacting with immigration agents? And do they need a warrant before searching someone's private property? They're going to tell you what those are. Basically, it's resist, resist, resist. And then you've got the subheading here: businesses that employ immigrants brace for Maine enforcement action. This is all in one section of the paper. Trump threatens Insurrection Act to put an end to Minneapolis protests. Let me tell you something. If the local police refuse to help to protect federal facilities, including ICE facilities, if they are allowing ICE vehicles to be destroyed and lockers with guns and paperwork stolen and put out from those, disseminated from those destroyed vehicles, and there's no police support for this, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? Trump is going to send in troops and do the job and protect ICE facilities and protect ICE agents and stop this nonsense. These are not protests, these are riots, pure and simple. When you start destroying property, when you start assaulting people, when you're throwing rocks and you're throwing water bottles that are frozen in a freezer and it's now a dangerous projectile, and you're using your car to ram police officers and you're blocking police officers with your cars, that's called insurrection. That's what the Insurrection Act is for. That's not discussed in here. That's just, this is just all anti-Trump and all the rest, and trying to create a ugly picture. Protest, tear gas, and another shooting. Yeah. Shooting followed a chase. Yeah, there was another shooting where three illegal immigrants assaulted an ICE officer who was chasing a criminal illegal alien who ran from him, and then they were assaulting him with a broomstick and a something else, a shovel, and that officer was just supposed to sit there and take it, I guess. He shot one of the illegal immigrants in the leg, and they arrested all of those. But now that's another flashpoint. That's what they're looking for. Just another, pawn sacrificed to the cause. Is just insane that we aren't hearing any of the background. We aren't hearing any of the reality that's out there. And they're covering up the fact that there are serious riots taking place. They're destroying property, they're attacking ICE officers and doxing them, suggesting that they should be shot and all the rest. And we're supposed to sit by and say, well, nothing to see here, they're just protesters. This propaganda has to be recognized for what it is. It is just turning your eye from the reality of the situation. We have a situation where mass migration, open borders, flooded this country with 20 million or more people that didn't have a legal right to be here. In a lot of cases, they're criminals, they're rapists, gang members, murderers, child molesters. The list goes on. And the reality is that mass migration that was open borders under the auto pen president has overrun our country. And so Trump, his only choice here is to fix that. And that is to level that out and get rid of the worst of the worst and then work on how we deal with the others. And that is the simplicity of this. We can't leave this uncorrected. If we do, we've lost our country because it's lawlessness. It's basically giving criminals preference over American citizens just trying to go about their daily lives and being murdered by illegal truckers on the highway, by rapists just running down a trail, or by people ripping us off our taxpayer dollars by the billions of dollars when we're trying to figure out how to pay for health care, pay for schools, pay for all of these things. We've got this massive program of organized criminal looting of the United States and state budgets by illegal criminal aliens. And so all Trump's doing is fixing it. And until this propaganda starts to turn around and people stop listening and believing this garbage passed off as what's real, we need to have a reality dose, and people need to pay more attention to the reality of what's actually going on. I mean, this whole thing with the woman that was shot, right away they came out and said she was turning wheel away and all the rest. Well, now that the medical report that ICE agent was actually injured, had internal bleeding, that's someone who got hit by a car, struck by a vehicle. If she hadn't turned her wheel, he might have been run over by that vehicle. And he had no way of knowing in that split second whether or not that car was going to go straight and run him over or was going to turn. And he also, out of his ear, heard the associate of that woman that was driving the car looking directly at him as she tried to drive over him, telling her, drive, just drive. All this has come out now. That doesn't sound like somebody who was just innocent person just trying to leave. You put yourself in the way, you put yourself in harm's way like that, you block ICE officers, and then you disregard their very explicit commands to stop and get out of the car. You back up and then you go forward with a ICE officer in front of you. You get what you get. It's unfortunate. The woman was a pawn. There are people who were applauding that she was shot and killed with an ICE officer performing with self-defense. But they are applauding it because it's what they needed to ignite the fire and get things going. They don't care about that woman or her 6-year-old child or anybody else. It's all about creating chaos and mayhem. And that's just what they're after, and that's who they are. These are not nice people. And the sooner we figure that out, the better. And of course, the suppressed Herald and the propaganda machine are not going to help us to figure out the truth of what is really going on and allow us to make decisions and make you know, real gain real understanding of what's going on because they keep lying, they keep the propaganda machine going. Don't believe your lying eyes is their standard refrain. And we can see it when you are allowed with proper, real journalists reporting reality. You can see that those are very, very violent riots, destruction, assaults, and if they could, they would harm those ICE agents that are just police officers doing their job and following the law. And that is where we are. We have law and order or we have chaos. Liberals like chaos. They like chaos and everything about what's going on in our society. That's who they are. If you want to get rid of chaos, we need to get rid of the liberals. And that's it. So make sure you understand politics is local, so is propaganda, and there's plenty of it going on. Here in Maine, it's called the Suppress Herald. Across the country, it's called the Washington Compost and the New York Times and CBS and NBC and Communist News Network and Messed Up NBC and all of those, which are all losing their mind because the reality is, economically and beyond, Trump is starting to turn things around and start to win. And I believe that it's going to get better and better as the year goes on, and the propaganda machine is going to get worse and worse. We are going to see lies and despicable misdirection like nothing we've seen before. So brace yourself and stay tuned. The Suppress Herald will keep breaking down how the local media machine, propaganda machine, turns things around and tries to basically misguide people and have them believe what's unbelievable. Stick here for truth. We'll be back.